And we're back, it seems.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. And we're back, it seems, with I just wanted to make sure. We're back now for round 5 of this 9-round tournament where we are going to be showcasing a deck that we haven't seen thus yet. We've seen a lot of Whitebeard. We've seen a lot of Zora, a lot of Kinemon, but now we're going to see Ivankov. I think Ivankov is a really cool deck. Takes blue in a very different direction than it's been before, as opposed to having these really big hands with like flooding the board. We're going to go ahead and remove our hand by flooding the board and then trying to mitigate that with other very powerful draw engines. So I'm excited to see what Ivankov can do. We're going to go see how it plays out into a Kinemon. So let's get right into the game.
And Ivankov, first and foremost, starting off on odd done, which I think is something that they want to do. Definitely starting out with the field as well. So
Yes,
all
sir.
all gears turning for the Ivankov player.
So that's something that's interesting about Ivankov. Most often than not, you want to hit a leader because you want them to discard their hand. But with Ivankov, he will gladly discard his hand to keep some life so that he can go ahead and meet his condition of going to 0. So super duper cool. Having a good start. Ivankov has a fantastic 1-3-5-7. So opting to go first is good for them. But Kinemon, no joke, just went turn 2 or turn 1 Okiku, which is terrifying.
It wouldn't be difficult to believe that the Kinemon player actually won the die roll and let the Imperial go first. So
Yeah, I mean, both decks doing exactly what they want to do. As even though we have a little bit of glare, I'm assuming that is a Momo getting pitched from the Kinemon player,
it's a
being
Bonnie by
defensive.
him.
Okay, some
Same
sort
card.
of one drop, and then we're gonna go ahead and see the Doflamingo. Doflamingo's gonna go ahead and allow the Ivankov to stack the top of the deck, and by doing so, with the new Kama land, we can go ahead and tap it, draw a card, and then filter our hand, which is really really nice.
So definitely a lot of skill expression that goes into the Ivankov deck, and I want to believe that since it's really early into the format, we'll see how many reps basically the Ivankov player has had with the deck and how comfortable he is making all these decisions because there is a lot of card selection.
Most certainly, and I really this is why the Don Quixote blocker has really come back into the game in set two. Not only because he can't be just removed easily by Whitebeard or by Seaquake, but by the fact that it lets you curate the next couple of turns. If you play him correctly, it lets you stack your turn, your 5, your 7, and so on and so forth. So if you can go ahead and kind of know exactly how your opponent's going to play, you can do a lot of really good turn management thing. So he didn't choose to tap the new common land, which is interesting. But definitely we're going to go ahead and see him attack leader. He's going to go ahead and defend with a 2K. He's going to swing over the Don Quixote blocker for 6. And then he still has 2 Dawn available, which looks like he's going to go Kinemon ability, doing a little tippy tappy.
So you love the counting on the table,
I love the tippy tappies. I think that's so fun.
but
So
just
he
to
goes ahead
mention,
and yeah, he goes Kinemon ability, summon Raizo. So that's a very formidable board already coming down from the Kinemon player. Whether the Okiku is removed or not, the fact of the matter is that if he has an access to another Bonnie or a Momo, he can then trigger the Raizo, and then that's where the gears really start turning for the green deck. You start drawing 3 cards a turn as opposed to 1.
mhm.
Feels bad, man.
No, and I feel like just to go back to the usage of the field from the Ivanka player, the reason why he probably didn't do this because he wanted to insulate some of the combo power cards that he had in his hand to get through that Okiku plus leader swing turn, and then this turn he might go ahead and use that field. Maybe he's waiting to use the field after he's played one of his 7 drops. You know, it could be any of these combinations.
No, there's certainly a lot of different reasons for why we're going to go ahead and do it. We're going to go ahead and summon another Flamingo blocker. I guess we're going to get to go 1 card deeper, as well as developing, just using our Dawn as efficiently as possible. Maybe his hand was very high counter based, and because of that, he didn't really want to lose a card to the new Kama land. But definitely sets up for our following turn, which is our 7-drop turn, which we must play the Ivankov character card and deploy something big alongside it.
And it feels like, at least from the early turns, the Ivankov player is in a really nice position in terms of not necessarily board control because both players have a 4K in play, but just you know how you expect the matchup to go. There are a lot more bombs from the side of the Ivankov player, so both players being at high life totals definitely benefits the blue player in this position.
If you think about what the green players' bombs are, piggybacking off of your idea, it's the Odin and the 7-drop. Many of them have decided not to play 8-cost Kid, and in doing so, you know what card answers the 7-drop Kid very, very well that's most definitely in the Ivankov deck? Draco Mihawk. So we have an answer to one of the problems. Now we just have to have an answer for Odin. And I believe that if you go Ivankov character plus Crocodile or Ivankov plus Luffy, you'll have enough characters on board that will be able to deal with the Odin. So very, very cool. So we'll go ahead and see a Momo. And this is what I was talking about with the Raizo on the board. If you go Momo, Momo will add Odin. Now, if we want to attack with the Raizo, we can choose to. We don't even have to attach any Dawn to it if we don't want to. But it looks like the Kinemon is opting to do so, just to have some sort of pressure as well.
It might even be correct not to attach a Donan and use it for something else, simply because
You
the
don't want
Ivanka
the
player is probably going to guard everything this turn anyway, right?
correct. So there's something to be said about, what you do with the amount of down. Because if you do force the Ivankov player to pitch a card, that again follows right into their game plan of going to 0. But he is at 3 cards, so he can guard this if he so chooses to.
One would
Let me
hope
go.
that he does for sure. And
So we've definitely drawn for turn, drawn an Odin off of Momo, and drawn for Raizo. And he's going to go ahead and guard this just as expected. And then he still has 3 Dawn to work with here. Now, 3 Dawn in Kinemon, what does that signal to you? And that's going to go swing again 5 with the Kinemon. Let's see.
so,
If he guards this, that is a really optimal play from the Ivankov, because I'm assuming the last card in the hand is the character card Ivankov.
no, definitely. And here is going to be easy guard, I want to say. Just a little bit of deliberating. And then from the Greens' perspective, another Okiku.
So
That one is reduced, and actually the reason it's reduced is because you declare the effect of the leader before playing Momo. Momo will not consume the leader's effect in terms of still having a lingering reduction on the next 3-drop or higher that you play, and then you can play your Okiku for 2, even though you have 3 characters in play. It's a very skilled play from the Kinemon player, just knowing his rulings and knowing his leader.
no, certainly he played that excellently. So the first thing he did, he had a Rise on board. He goes Kinemon effect, Momo, and then he finishes out the turn with Okiku and Beji. So he's gonna go ahead and go 4 at the Momo, saying swing your leader at me as well, which is perfectly fine. I'm okay with him swinging with the Flamingo blocker, as the Flamingo blocker was gonna get tapped anyways, unless he opts to go Ivankov Luffy bounce the Okiku. So definitely
Which
see 7
is
going to be tapped this turn, because no matter what this was happening, at least that's what you think is going to happen with the Don Quixote blocker. So he's going to go ahead and use Emporio's effect, draw all the way up to 3, and then resolve the effect to summon an Impel down 6 cost or lower, which is Izuma. So it's not the Luffy. Not as optimal as you want it to be. He can, in fact, use the new Kama Land to pitch everything from hand and go to 0. But knowing what the last couple cards in his top of the deck are, he opts not to do it.
and so far the Ivanka player just firing all cylinders. And I mean, having this card a 5k blocker right now, but once it becomes 1 card in hand, it'll be a 7k. And just having a lot of defense for this early game is exactly what he wants.
Mm-hmm.
It being tapped down by Okiku might be a little awkward, but he actually decides to attack with leader first.
It looks like, because this is the turn where the evens just match up on Kinemon, so this is probably going to be the Odin turn. He's just going to go ahead and start the Odining, if you will.
But this
And
Odin doesn't look that formidable. I mean, it has to go through a lot of ground blockers in order to actually be efficient, and that's only the first turn that it gets to attack. I mean, it's going to be a couple of turns before this Odin can convert any sort of advantage, and it feels like the blue player is in a dominant position here. I mean,
but
I want to say
this is
even if something
exactly.
as simple as a Mihawk comes down, I mean, it might just be over, right?
I mean, this is easily what you see as an Ivankov player. That's just why they max out on Perona, max out on the Flamingo blocker, because they want to make it so that you can Ivankov multiple times in a game. That is your win condition. The first Ivankov might not be an ender, but once you do Ivankov 2, 3 times, that's a lot of advantage that you go through, and just cycle way too many bodies onto the board.
So
So
the
I
Ivankov player decided to keep his hand last turn, knows the top of his deck, so it's very likely if he doesn't have a large bomb on this turn, it's actually not on the top of his deck either, because he would have chosen to draw it. So maybe just a lot of defensive options available, but not proactive bombs per se. But we'll see what he has.
think this is the last turn of the top of the deck that he's aware of. So if he doesn't even like where he's at right now, he could just he hasn't used a new Kama Land at any point in time yet, but he's always available to do so. So he's going to go ahead and attack for 7. Always attacking Kinemon feels interesting.
Dangerous.
Yeah, giving them more cards to sustain their big bodies is terrifying, especially with a lot of them opting to play Punk Gibsons and things along that nature. So he goes ahead and takes the 7. I believe he's at 4 cards in hand at this time. So it seems like a good take.
He
But
has
now
to
it starts
make
getting to the scary parts.
the Ivanka player has to make some sort of proactive play here. I mean, I want to believe that he could have aggressively used his field in order to find more bombs. Maybe he was just very much prioritizing the defense in the early game, which I do like in this kind of a matchup. But he needs a follow up of some kind.
Certainly. So I was hoping that he would go swing 7 with the Ivankov and then Ivankov again with the rest of your Dawn.
That would have been
Uh,
great. Yeah.
that would have been a really solid use of your turn. But it seems like now that you've attacked with that Ivankov, ooh, interesting. So we'll go 10. So we've just deciding to go on the offense as the Ivankov player, placing our opponent down to 2 life. But now we can use this Odin as a removal tool, which is exactly what Kinemon wants to do. He just gained a fresh hand size. Now we can use this Odin to remove the Ivankov, remove the Inazuma, and we're in a good spot.
Yeah, and I feel like from the position that the blue player was in at the beginning of the turn versus now, it just feels a little bit unfavorable because, like you were mentioning, the Kinemon is just so effective at swinging at either life or field. And then in this case, if he does field, he forces cards out of the Ivankov player's hand. And Ivankov also doesn't have Dawn open, so any large attacks are effective here.
But let's not forget that there are cards like Gum Gum Rain that could be used in scenarios like this. So he's going to go ahead and I like the 7 attack. I'm assuming it's at the Inazuma while also resting the. And he's going to go ahead and pitch a 2K, which will make it 7, but then Inazuma effect go to 9. Going to go ahead and swing with the Raizo just to go ahead and remove the Flamingo, draw a card.
Mhm.
And this is what I'm talking about now. He's going to go 9-9 over these guys, and we're in for a bad time.
Yeah, if both of these cards from the blue player side just go into the discard pile this turn, and I mean, it looks like they're just going to, there's no reason not
Yeah,
to
he's down. He's
swing.
down to 1 card in hand. So even if
Yeah.
that 1 card in hand was a 2K, he cannot go above 9. So the Odin being at exactly 9 threshold, and he can just restand and then do it again for 4 Dawn feels like a very solid use of his turn.
And now this is where looking back at where the Ivankov was, he had full ability to I think churn through a couple more cards and just see something like a Mihawk. You know, even if he wasn't 100% sure that it was in the top cards of his deck, he could have still aggressively dug toward it just because you just need something to answer the Odin. But now things look a little dire.
Yeah, it's looking rather scary for the Ivankov plan. This is the scenario that we've talked about. This is a scenario where Ivankov kind of crumbles. If their deck isn't firing exactly 1, 3, 5, 7, 7 again, or 9, they do a skip turn, and green is able to catch up. It effectively nullifies the game. So Bonnie's going to go ahead and come down, play a Beji as well, keeping 1 Dawn up for a possible waterfall, which is devastating. And the Ivankov is at 1 card in hand that he just drew for turn. He also has access to the new Kamaland. New Kamaland is going to go ahead and let him draw a card. Hopefully, it's literally Ivankov character card. If it's not the Ivankov character card, this game is effectively over.
And you can understand from the perspective of the Ivankov player, he had a lot of good defensive tools in his hand, and he was trying to use those in order to keep his life total at the maximum going into the later portion of the game. Maybe he got a little too tunnel visioned on keeping those defensive options, and really, I guess if you use those defensive options and then you keep your life total high, the whole point is to play a bomb type card, but he didn't have access to any of those bombs. So it just feels like he drew up an entire game plan but didn't execute at the very end. So
So he's going to go on a heavy swing here, and then that's just going to get Beji chump blocked. And even if that went ahead and swung at the Bonnie, where we're in for a bad time. So that's going to go ahead and trigger the Ivankov's effect now that we're at 0, which is kind of nice. It's a kind of a consolation prize.
mhm.
But this Okiku's going to do some work,
Yeah, and you
most
can see him
certainly.
fanning out his discard pile, all guard power, but no payoff other than that one 7 drop Ivankov.
And it
And
wasn't even like Ivankov Luffy, which is unfortunate as well. It was Ivankov in Azuma, which is within the realm of Okiku.
I do believe that the Luffy could have, if he had Luffy in that scenario, could have bounced Okiku once it comes down and even further extended the game. So just all
It
around.
would have been perfect. I was hoping it was going to be Ivankov Luffy. Luffy would have put him to 0 cards in hand, and then would have just started the Ivankov engine of just drawing 2 cards every turn, cycling deeper and deeper through the deck, so you can Ivankov multiple times. That's kind of what you just want to do. If you the first Ivankov won't win you the game, but the third one probably will. So
Most
again,
certainly.
now we're going on the Kinemon's turn. Kinemon, basically untapping with all his dudes and 9 Dawn. Yeah, that's not what we love to see. So we're going to go 6 at lead, tapping the Inazuma. We're perfectly fine for removing a 2K here, as he's down to 1 card left in hand. And then that is just an easy clear with the Odin. He's not going to commit any Dawn to Odin, which is interesting because now a 2K will guard the first attack, and I guess he's completely okay with it.
How do
He's going to
you
go 5 at lead, I'm assuming.
how do
Yep.
you believe attacking character over leader in this scenario? I mean, he has such a commanding position that either would probably be okay, but just getting the game over with over the course of 2 turns might be the most optimal.
I agree, and that's why I like that Okiku went face. I would have liked one more Dawn investment on the Okiku to go 7 at face. He's going to float a bit of Dawn here, exactly 2, but do you really need to float Dawn? Do you need Punk Gibson to be available? I guess it's better than not.
Just covering up all his
Bases, you know?
bases, but at the same time, he's so far ahead. At, at some point, you have to say, okay, it doesn't, nothing else in the game matters other than getting the game over with. So even giving the opponent a little bit more combo power, for example, attacking the 7K character card on his field, even if that card lives, it's not doing much of anything on the way back. Eventually, it'll just chump block. So I just feel like attacking life is the best course of action there. But either way, now we see a 3-drop Flamingo getting to see the top 5 cards of the deck and stacking hopefully some power cards to the top. So
So certainly this is what I like about the Flamingo blocker once again. I mean, this could also have just been a Perona, but he can Flamingo here. Flamingo can then stack an Emporio. Then with a new common land, he can draw it, pitch the last card out of his hand, and then go Emporio, draw fresh grip, and then what do we do from there? I don't
certainly the loop
know.
might be
I
important.
don't know what we do from there, but it looks good. It looks good. It looks good.
Any attack here just gets consumed by the killer blocker, you would have to assume, keeping
Yeah.
alive the Raizo and the Bonnie just to further card advantage. And at this point, it's just, essentially ending the game as the green player feels like he has a commanding position.
100%. So even if it's just tough, like you were saying, any attack is consumed. So even if he goes Emporio into the Okiku, he just blocks it with Killer. I think the Kinemon is at like 10 cards in hand, and then he'll just draw one for Killer, draw one for turn, go to 12. And then Bonnie, Raizo, and it's just like, ooh, ooh, ooh.
So let's draw up. Let's say he could stack not just the top 5 cards of his deck, but his entire deck. What would a comeback scenario look like? And I do feel like that 7-drop Emporio has to be the next play he makes this game. So,
So as predicted, yeah, we have that. I mean, the
but
keeping the 2 Dawn
well
up is
played.
also cute because there's something to be said about just going Punk Gibson here and resting the blocker, and then just going on the full offensive on the next turn. So he's going to go ahead and new common land, pitch the Mihawk, and then we're going to have to see the Emporio here. We're going to go ahead and draw
There it is.
another three
Okay.
cards, right?
So definitely a good comeback mechanic and drawing 3 cards. You want to see hopefully Luffy
And
here.
yep.
There's the Luffy. Okay.
So Luffy's going to go ahead and pitch. He probably stacked 2 1Ks, and then that's going to probably bounce the Okiku so that we can keep the blocker. This is why I'm saying the Punk Gibson would have been really, really cute here because then we have a way of just resting it no matter what. We would have been able to keep the killer blocker as well, and then Emporio effect draw another 2. So
And this is why
at
you
best
don't
he
want
has
to
another
give.
2 2Ks in hand. So we just have to play around them sufficiently.
Yeah, you don't want to give blue any sort of time, especially not this new impel down style of OPO2 blue deck because they just have so many comeback mechanics with the Emporio 7-drop with the Luffy. But still a commanding position from the side of the player with the Odin in play. I mean, he could just play another Odin, right? Why not?
Yeah,
So
no, I mean there is something to be said about there you have to put some fear into the Kinemon player because there is something to be said about putting a lot of Dawn on Luffy next turn, bouncing a potential blocker and then 2 checks, which is the final 2 life, and then trying to end the game. Now, can Kinemon end this game this turn? Certainly not. He has 4 attacks to 4 life, so he can't end the game, but he can certainly has to find a way to stall what's going on. So summoning a 5 cost blocker seems like a really good option because Luffy can't naturally handle that.
that's true.
So
And
that seems like a
also,
good way to do that.
A good way to recycle the bounty just to keep the card advantage going. You probably want to attack with Raizo, even if you don't invest any Dawn into it. But he's investing one just to get a clean 5k attack on 5k leader.
Which should get blocked here no matter what. Removing a Buggy from the Ivankov player's hand. Buggy being a really strong card. Really, really strong. So we know that the Kinemon player is taxed 5 Dawn to play the Law. He has 3 Dawn available, so he's going to just go 8-8, I believe.
Do you believe if you have pumpkins in hand, do you believe he uses 3 Dawn to attack a second time, or just leaves the punk available for defense? I mean, like you said before, one of his only lose conditions is to get his last 2 life hit with the Luffy, so it's a
Well,
little bit
just
scary.
imagine this exact turn, but he had a killer blocker up as well as a rested flamingo blocker. Would have been much nicer, much cleaner, but he's just gonna able to law anyways, law bounce the Bonnie. I'm assuming a Beji or something's gonna come down. He goes for the Okiku with the aggressive play. Okiku most certainly is gonna get like removed from the game by the Luffy, but does that really mean much? Not sure.
I do believe. Is there an argument to at some point target down this Raizo? It's gotten so much card advantage. Before you couldn't do it simply because the blue player just didn't have a board, but now how do you sequence these attacks to most efficiently take cards from the green player's hand? I mean, blue looked like it was out of the game before, but they still had 5 life. Now they only have 2, but some card advantage has been accrued, some board state has been accrued. So, what do you think happens from here?
So there is something unfortunately the way that I do see this going into the blue player's favor is that he goes and puts 3 Dawn under the Luffy, which is a weird number, right? But again, we're going 4 above the highest blocker this time, activating Luffy's effect, dumping 2 cards out of my hand, bouncing the Okiku, forcing a block or like 3 or 4 cards out of my opponent's hand, and then playing another Ivankov. That is kind of what I
So
want to see from a
essentially,
Luffy player.
Ivankov looping is one of the only ways to continue
Yeah,
to
we
play
have
this.
to. We have to at least see an Ivankov this turn again, which is like we missed an Ivankov turn. We cannot afford to miss another one, especially at the point that we're in.
Oh,
Mihawk doesn't feel terrible.
that doesn't look bad at all. As a matter of fact, it kind of accomplishes the same goal that this Luffy going sideways would have in terms of taking the block and also allows one. I mean, do we attack the Raizo? Is the question here. Do we keep board state instead of attacking the Raizo? Do we go face just to pressure?
I think we six the Raizo with our leader,
Yeah,
and Luffy most certainly has to bounce the Okiku because if Okiku gets to live, we have effectively lost the game.
gotcha. So yeah, definitely getting our blocker tapped by the Okigo is not optimal. Luffy has to go sideways. If Luffy goes sideways, the rest of the board also goes sideways. So 6 at Raizo, like you mentioned before, a good attack. Not even gonna guard it. Understanding that his hand has to go to defending all of these Luffy attacks.
And
And
he is unfortunately forced to swing with Luffy. If he was able to hold back a Luffy here, that would be really, really good. But he's gonna go ahead Luffy here, use Luffy's effect, remove the last 2 cards from my hand, which I can't really. One of them was Perona, the other one is a mystery.
I think there was another Luffy actually, which is a
That's
little
unf-
unfortunate.
that's
But
unfortunate, but it's okay. We'll go ahead and bounce that. We'll swing for 7. He's gonna remove a 2K plus a card of your choice. But it's
and this
fine.
attack is
We do
actually
have to.
quite efficient if you think about it from the perspective of the green player being tapped out. 2 cards are coming out of here no matter what. So
And then I believe we also kind of swing with Ivankov here. There
no,
is
at
something
this
to be
point,
said
if we
about
have one eligible target to be attacked in the form of the Luffy, we might as well just throw the Ivankov out there.
yeah, because he's gonna have to go for board, which gives us more time to Ivankov loop again, which is exactly what we want to do. There's only so many things that the green player can do on their turn, and hopefully we can mitigate them by drawing like another 4 cards.
This
He
is
opts not to swing with the Ivankov and chooses to end his turn. Emporio's effect will then activate and draw another 2 cards, furthering him deeper into the deck.
there's been a very good back and forth between these two players, and honestly, that's just a consequence of how the Ivankov leader works. Just going down to 0 cards in hand, and the way that you efficiently do that is by playing cards like Luffy. And honestly, just that 7 into 6 Ivankov into Luffy like play that we saw last turn was just incredibly efficient for what the deck is trying to do. So
Yeah, no, it's honestly a lot. Imagine that turn where he just kind of like did nothing. He went Ivankov Luffy instead, and he would have been in a very commanding position had that happened. But unfortunately, because of that skip turn, and he was able to just kind of like deploy the Odin with not much repercussions, we're in the state that we're in. And that, I mean, Ivankov, I believe, is a very strong leader, but it's kind of propelled by how many character Ivankovs you can summon in a game. That card is very, very strong, and definitely multiples are necessary in order to win the game. But even though he's tapped out, he does have access to a Gum Gum Rain. I always want to keep Gum Gum Rain in the discussion because that is just a card that could potentially be in the Ivankov player's deck.
I want to see also Death Wink at some point. Just resolve. That would be quite funny.
I mean,
But
Deathwing is a kind of cool card. You have Ivankov and you still have 3 up. Seems good.
at the same time, that's just emblematic of what Blue tries to do. It tries to leverage the board advantage that it can gain just from playing large 7 and 9 drops, and then at the same time using their life as a resource. The turn that they do that, they kind of lose a little bit of tempo. Summoning a 9 drop like Mihawk is not easy to do, but at the same time, that refuel that you get from your life allows you to find more combo pieces like Ivankov into Luffy, and then that also fuels the rest of your strategy with your leader. So I think that the Ivankov deck is very well thought out and in what it's trying to do, and it's very, very blue.
It's very blue. So you know what's really interesting here? If the Odin swings at Luffy, which I believe the Odin kind of must, the Odin swings at Luffy for 9, which seems like a good number. If he has two 2Ks, or if he has just a Gum Gum Rain, again, gotta mention that one more time, he can counter out of it and force the Odin to come at Luffy one more time. And by doing so, he just literally counters out of it really, really easily. So he's gonna go ahead and swing. Gonna go ahead and swing 9. I believe if we can't counter out of this, which we're at 1 card in hand, means we can't. I'd kind of block with the Flamingo here because there is no way that the green player can end the game, and we're forcing him to tap another 3 Dawn. So we're gonna tax him 3 Dawn if he wants to kill the Luffy, which he must. And if he does that, it'll be very difficult for him to really deploy another set of cards that will deal with our board.
Wait, he went live?
That's very strange, but I respect it.
That's a little crazy, right? Because now, I mean, if you think about it from the perspective of the Kinemon player, I don't think, or rather, he's telling himself, okay, if I don't just swing at life and get the game over with, this board state is just going to consume you over the next 2 turns. So it seems like he's saying, okay, you can't kill this Kinemon, or I'll get Okiku, and Okiku will get through your blockers and finish the game. And at the same time, this Kinemon is attacking you twice a turn. So
I mean,
maybe that's his
he's
mentality.
actually going to need another law here in order. What is this?
That is a 4K blocker, actually.
Oh, that's the Cat Viper into
Yes.
another blocker. Okay, okay, I see what's going on. Okay,
Double
okay.
blocker here. I am incentivized to believe that he has Paradise up just because he didn't put the draw card effect on the killer. And it that turn actually did accomplish a goal of dealing damage if the Kinemon player did determine that he has to just finish this game as soon as possible, which I do agree with him just because the Ivankov looked like he has an overwhelming board at this point. So
Interesting. Is there a way? I mean, there are many, many cards in the Kinemon's player's hand. We're aware of probably a Paradise Waterfall, or it's a bluff, either or. But we're aware of an Okiku and a Bonnie in hand. Besides that, everything else is a mystery to us. But there are a lot of cards in green in general that just don't have counterpower. Specifically, I believe that this Cat Viper, this 4K blocker, doesn't have counterpower. So if we're able to bounce this card with the Luffy, and we can just, kind of deal with this killer, we might be able to deal enough pressure that he might just not be able to combo out, and we can maybe steal this game.
yeah, so definitely going aggressive this turn is going to happen. Just how does he want to play cards from his hand first, or attack with his leader first, or his characters first is gonna determine how the turn plays out. But honestly, going through the 2 blockers might be a little difficult just because other than bounce, blue doesn't have an effective way to deal with those. And any chance that he gives the green player in combat, he'll just Paradise Waterfall the Odin, and then that'll be a great attacker moving into next turn.
So I do
So,
like the fact that we're using a Perona here. We do have New Kama Land active, so we can start potentially seeing some sort of combo here that can lead us to victory.
and I mean, you're looking for blockers at this point.
Hmm.
I would say blockers or a way to bounce blockers. So anything with blocker, but
There's also something to be said about the fact that if he does play a couple blockers, the biggest blocker that I think Ivankov plays would have to be the Don Quixote blocker, right? Or sorry, Inazuma. Inazuma and Mr.
Mhm.
3, which are both forecasted blockers that technically get suspended or rested by Yamato. So he'd have to have a couple of them in order to potentially not lose this game.
The green player has played at least the last turn or so. It feels like he doesn't have a Yamato available to him, or he's been holding on to it very preciously the entire time, just to do that exactly that you just mentioned. Just save it for the final turn of the game when he's going in with the Odin. So if he does actually have Yamato, it'll have been great to hold on to that resource his entire time, because he could have gotten minimal value from it in the earlier turns, but this will be a critical Yamato to have moving into next turn. So
So we'll see what happens here. We're going to go see a 5 to the leader. See how the green player responds to that. That's going to go ahead and remove the Bonnie. The one of the only cards that we really knew was in his hand. We'll go 7 Ivankov. And we're still doing a little bit of thinking here. I mean, we still have a lot of Dawn available. We have 9 total Dawn available to us at this point in time. Looks like we're going to tap 3, 1. Okay.
so many different lines that the blue player can take. This 10 is a decently clean attack. I want to say it's going at the Odin
I'm
as well.
assuming it's going at the Odin, but that would just be 2 cards from hand. There are just so many cards in this hand that I don't think we can feasibly push through
But
these
it's like you said
cards.
before, a lot of those cards might actually be air cards that can't
Hmm.
be used for guard. So his hand might be deceptively larger than what it actually is, and that's a consequence of these bounce effects that have been very efficient against the green cards that have no combo, like Okiku, for example. So, and then this cat viper, I'm assuming it's gonna get bounced at some point, right?
Yeah. So one of these cards has to get bounced for sure, but it just
Do
really
you
depends.
do you take the block here with the cat viper just as a way to have your killer be bounced to just have a little bit more combo in your hand? I mean, it's gonna happen at some point, right?
Hmm. I mean, I don't think you do because now he's only left with one potential attacker and you have 2 blockers. Even though the attacker can pseudo remove a blocker, you're not in a space where you care too much. So we're going to go use the new Kamaland here. We're going to go draw a card that we stacked. We're going to remove a 2K, which feels absolutely horrid. But it's the unfortunate situation that we're in. We have exactly 4 Dawn left and we're
That's a
playing.
block. Okay,
Ooh, that's really interesting.
that's actually
Because
quite
if
good.
that's actually really interesting because if the last card in life is a Boa Hancock, there is a universe where we may get out of here alive. So we'll go ahead and play another blocker, which is going to go ahead and let us look at the top 5, stack the top of the deck to our choosing, and then I
But
believe there's no reason not to pressure with the Luffy here,
no,
just to remove
definitely the
more
Luffy
cards.
attacks, because at some one of these two blockers has to leave the board during this turn. Ideally, both, but I guess he doesn't want to.
Hmm.
What would be the incentive to holding back there? Obviously, keeping the Luffy alive going into the next turn cycle. But what value is that Luffy gaining next turn that it wouldn't gain right now? Is my question. And
I mean, it looks like the Kinemon player, again, the way that we win this game is believing that his hand is air. So here's the Cat Viper that we were talking about, irrelevant which one he chooses to suspend at this point in time. They're both chump blockers. And speaking of, we
there's
have got
Yamato. Okay, so he
exactly
did hold
6
both of
Dawn
those the whole
available.
game. So
Um, they're okay. This isn't exactly lethal. We'll go ahead and pitch that 1K. He's going to go and swing 9. That definitely he gets outed because even if this is 2 2Ks, he's unable to guard it. And it was a 2K and a 1K, which just isn't enough. But funnily enough, this game really came down to the wire, as crazy as it looked from the green player's side.
no, I
I believe
think
he had maybe one turn. This was probably one of his last turns enabled to defend him. I'd love to see what was left in the green player's hand, as I'm guessing that a lot of his hand was just fake.
yeah, no comment. I mean, we see two Okikos in the front of his hand, and that's out of 6 or 7 cards at most. So it wouldn't be a surprise to see that only like 4 or 3 of those were actually live cards. And just because of that, I want to say that the Ivankov player had a very real chance of winning the game the next turn, which is probably why he kept the Luffy standing just to keep it safe, but he ended up dying to the Odin swings there.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, Odin is a big powerhouse, right? It's a big powerhouse in the
It's a
meta.
kaiju, you
It
know.
is a kaiju, man. I have been mentioning it. The more I talk about it, the stronger he just becomes, right? That's just how he works. But I believe that the turn that the Ivankov player whiffed, right? There was
Yeah,
a pivotal turn where he
yeah,
just kind of did nothing and he just gave away his board, right? You know what I'm talking about? Where the turn where he
yeah. Of course. Yeah.
Ivankov, the turn right after he Ivankoved, which wasn't the cleanest Ivankov. It wasn't an Ivankov that summoned a crocodile or Luffy. It summoned an
Mhm.
Inazuma, which is suboptimal. On that specific turn, he then swung out. The Kinemon player took every single hit because he doesn't care because he's Kinemon,
To refuel his
and
hand.
to refuel his hand, which he was becoming low on. And then he said, "This Odin will now be used as a board clear," which it was. And then we immediately went into a losing position that was brought back thanks to the Doflamingo blocker, which is really, really cool.
Just everything being drawn up, kind of how the Kinemon player wanted the. Okay, so the Imperial player had some chances and some crucial points where he could have used his field more aggressively in order to see a couple more cards from his deck, even knowing that a few of the cards were stacked, so he knew what they were. But he could have just ground through those, try to find a Mihawk sooner in the game, and he did actually find a Mihawk after a couple of draws. So the game would have looked completely different if on that off turn he just plays a Mihawk, leaves all his
Oh,
cards
can you
untapped,
imagine? Oh
and
my
then
goodness.
we saw that the game was super close, even when he did Mihawk a turn too late. So I just want to believe that that was the crucial moment where he kind of lost all board state. One could even say that if he starves the Kinemon player and just leaves him at 5 life or 4 life, only attacks with his leader, leaves his bombs per se untapped, and then just leverages the field more during the later portion of the game where he can actually throw a couple of bombs out there. I just feel like he was trying to keep a lot of his defensive cards in his hand just without understanding that he needed to be more proactive because he was actually winning the game at the time.